Okay, a little while ago, I did a video for a friend about, I think it was about a Spokane. And two people have commented on my last video and they were asking for more stuff about improv. And I've been meaning to reply to y'all, so this is me answering one of the questions. The other one was about a piñata. So if you guys also want to see a video about piñata, how piñata works, I'll do that. But I wanted to do this video because I think this video about monoscenes is like more will like provide a little bit more foundation to my other video about like learning about the monoscene first before learning about the piñata. I think is helpful because the monoscene is like a more foundational format because it's very simple, but a piñata is like has a layer of complexity to it. So I'll probably end up covering some of the same ground as the last video, and then in the next video I'll probably cover a little bit more of the same ground again to like show y'all how these skills transfer and how they might like look a little differently in each format. So today we're going to talk about the monoscene, and I think the questions were about like having a lifeboat monoscene or any advice that I have around a monoscene. I wrote it in my notes and here I am. So today we're going to talk about the challenges of a monoscene. Then we're going to talk about the benefits of doing a monoscene, why it could help your practice group, why it could help your improv individually. And then we'll talk about some format considerations that I think are true generally everywhere, but we'll talk about them here with respect to the monoscene and things that we could do with the monoscene using different kind of format considerations that will transform how a scene is done or how a monoscene is done, how your set will look. And then we'll talk about a couple of types of monoscene that these types can help you overcome these challenges or focus on some of these benefits. And these monoscene types will be based on, the format considerations, and we'll touch a little bit on the piñata. By the way, before I get too far into this video, my name is Matt Abedi. I've been a performer at the Magnet Theater on the Megawatt Night, which is one of the nights their house teams perform for 9 years, 10 years, I think. I think I'm going on 10 years. I'm sure that there are people who are way better at improv than I am. I'm just a guy who really loves improv and has coached for some number of years, and I'm happy to provide my take and my advice to anybody who's interested in what I have to say, and it's free. Okay, so the monoscene. There are a bunch of challenges to a monoscene, and I have to admit, I don't like doing monoscenes. I had to learn to like doing monoscenes because I was on a team with a bunch of people who really loved them, and I started to get pretty good at them, but personally, and I think a lot of people relate to this, especially in improv, I really love like the quick dopamine hit of a bunch of like pretty fast scenes. Like I love the end of a Herald where I get to do like 10 scenes that are based on what other people do. And for a while, when I was on a Herald team, I sometimes like when I was tired, I would just like not be in any of the scenes and just wait to be in third beats and just do the third beat side because it felt very natural to me just to listen to 15 minutes and then riff on all the jokes. So challenges. The first challenge is usually in a Herald or any format where you have 2 to 3 person scenes, right? They're very limited. So there's a lot of control over what happens. And really with 2 people, you only have so many ideas that can enter. If you've ever heard the note where a coach or director says like, try to make your sentence a little bit shorter, that isn't because like short sentences produce funnier jokes or funnier improv. It reduces the total number of ideas that are possible. And by doing that, we're only ping-ponging back and forth on a small set of ideas. And that provides focus, and that kind of focus provides humor, right? Having 6 people on stage all at the same time produces 10 different directions. And if we go 1 inch in 10 different directions, we don't get anywhere, right? But if we're really laser focused on just talking about, for instance, feeling like your roommate is slowly stealing some of your ice cream half a spoon at a time, and we go too far into that subject, we're going to find some humor. But if we end up talking about that and then 30 other things that your roommate does, well, we're just getting like a list of annoying things. Second thing is monoscenes produce problems with space and pacing. especially if you're in like a smaller theater. Monoscene, there's not a lot of places to walk, so people just kind of like end up sitting and staring at each other, and it looks like people are just kind of sitting on a couch and lounging. So it means that the scene kind of never picks up any pace, never feels fast, and the improvisers naturally physically slow down, their ideas slow down, and then the audience kind of slows down and produces less comedy. It's a lot less dynamic, similar reasons, but like it's harder in a group to suddenly have like an explosive reaction because the social pressure, our like natural reaction is to like match other people's energy. And I've noticed that people tend to like become not lowest, but like the common denominator. And in comedy, we want to see some variance, and that variance is where we produce humor. The next thing is monoscenes. I mean, this is really bland, is like monoscenes is like you can't escape, right? So if the monoscene starts off in a bad place and everyone on the team starts to have like a panic or feel stuck, that panic and that stuckness shows to the audience and it shows in your moves, and it kind of creates like this death spiral in the team. So it requires a lot of confidence and a lot of like feeling like, oh, even if we started in a weird place or in a place that isn't great, we will be able to get this off the ground. And that comes with reps, but it also comes with like some of the things we'll be talking about later, which is like in a monoscene, having certain constraints or things in your back pocket to help you navigate the monoscene will like keep you out of that. And the last thing is monoscenes tend to have a lack of focus. It tends to end up feeling like four people on a podcast kind of gabbing and having no real like agenda. And by the end of the show, like the audience and the team is like, what was that show about really? I mean, it's like, I don't know, we were just kind of talking and someone riffed a few jokes. So all of this ends up being kind of like the bigger problem of a monoscene, at least that I've seen. These are like common issues that I run into. So this all seems to say that you shouldn't do any monoscenes, but here are the benefits of doing a monoscene, and especially if you get really good at them, I would say that your scene work generally, especially in two-person scenes and heralds, even in really, really fast formats that are like tags only or a slacker or a Laurent, right, which can be pretty fast, things will work out a whole lot better for you because you'll have a lot of these skills, because you'll know how to get out of being stuck. You know, ironically, by swiping out of a scene or being able to bail on a scene in a herald, we never learn the key skill of like, okay, the scene's not great, so let's correct it. And sometimes you need to sit there in a 10, 15-minute scene and feel comfortable to be like, oh, let me try this to get us back on course. So benefits. First is it builds a lot of listening skills. So because we don't get to bail on one reality and move on to another one, it makes the team have to go like, okay, this is this person's perspective, this is that person's perspective, this is the general direction of where this scene is going. So you can't check out. By practicing on a monoscene and having to listen to 5 other people, 6 other people, however big your improv group is, and keeping track of what everyone is saying to the nth degree, builds a better monoscene, makes you a better improviser. The other piece is that you get better about passing focus. Even in a 2-person scene, if you've ever felt railroaded or you ever walked out of a scene and be like, I definitely railroaded that person. I worked like 100 miles an hour. I talked 100 miles an hour and the other person barely got a word in. Monoscenes, because there are 6 other people on stage, you have to, as a group, go like, okay, person A is going to be talking. Now person B has to be talking. Now person C has to be talking. And that is a hard-won skill. And it produces huge results because in a 2-person scene, even if you're like the funny character or you're the normal character, it can be super helpful to be like, it's time for the normal person to do their move, and it's now time for the character person to do their move. Because we need, or you've heard this probably as people like saying like you have to rest the game or whatever else it is. Next piece is the commitment. We touched on this before. This commitment to a monoscene teaches you key skills on how to salvage a scene. We'll talk a little bit about that in terms of format considerations and kind of moves that you can employ. And then the last piece, I would say, monoscenes are like, I don't know. Okay. Sorry, I got cut off there for a second. So if the editing is weird, I'm sorry. Um, Monoscenes are one of the best things that you can do because audiences get it pretty easily. Um, um, uh, Very often, if you see a wipe or whatever, like audience is sort of like, okay, I think I know what happened. They're starting like a new thing, and over the course of a show, they might like understand what's going on. But a mono scene, everyone can immediately relate to. There's no like new cognitive load. You don't need to have like an audience who's like in on improv to do it. And because a mono scene isn't like very friendly to like super gamey moves or people being like very like fast paced and wacky, which can feel like a little disconcerting to people, it feels monoscenes feel more like theater, like genuine theater that people watch and engage in. And so people relate to it a whole lot more. And the improv that you end up doing ends up being the kind of improv that like a general audience can like get behind a lot quicker, because it resembles something that isn't like niche. Like sketch comedy for comedians is like, well, everyone knows what SNL is, but like you're not in costume, you're not playing a character. So like audiences do have to take a leap, but take a little bit of a step of faith to understand that you're trying to do a sketch on your feet, and that they should ignore the fact that you're not an audience. A mono scene, because you're dressed in plain clothes, but you're doing the acting thing, people are a whole lot more like, okay, I'm on board. This guy's like a pirate, right? Like I'm on board that that we're all in an office. I'm on board that this is happening, and they can kind of let go of that little piece of what's it, whatever the term is for like suspension of disbelief, right? Okay, so format considerations. Monoscenes are really tough the same way that a montage is very tough, because a montage is very tough because there's no focus and we're just going to do scenes, random scenes, and then the show is over. Teams then have to be basically like, it's almost like having like too many choices. You're like, oh God, in every show that you're in, you could do 100 different things, or you're working with a teammate and like someone is just doing the thing they just learned in their last workshop or the last note that they heard from their director, and that kind of leads to these kinds of like, every show starts to feel like weirdly different, and it becomes hard to diagnose what's going on with the team, like for better or for worse. So one of the ways that we can deal with this in a monoscene or a montage is we produce format constraints that make it so that it's not just six people staring at each other trying to figure out what a scene with six people staring at each other is going to look like. And and this is a non-exhaustive list, but here are 6 constraints that I can think of that I think whenever you're creating a new format or working with a pretty loose format like a monoscene or a montage, or you're tweaking a format that exists, these are some format considerations that you can take into account to change whatever you're doing to fit like your team or what your interests are. Number 1 is making moves around game and heightening. I can do a separate video about game, but game is essentially when we look for a pattern of behavior that we would find in a sketch, or a joke that feels repetitive, or that we could find several iterations of, each iteration getting a little bit more intense, bigger, significant, surprising, whatever heightening kind of ends up being in that situation. And a good example of this is like a UCB style Herald is game oriented, which is like that scene had a joke. And so the next scene, when we return to that idea, we want to hear the joke, but not necessarily those characters. So that would be, hey, every time we do a new scene or every time we make a move, we want to make sure that they are game moves. And we'll talk about how that shows up in, well, let's just talk about it now. No, we'll talk about it in a second. The second type of format consideration is exploration or character. Exploration or character is usually taught in like Chicago style, or I've seen this at I've seen some of their principles. I've never studied at Groundlings, but I've seen some of the notes that my friends have taken at Groundlings workshops, or like people who are associated with Groundlings. And at Annoyance here and at the Magnet, character is really important. I think it's the level 2 class at the Magnet is literally called character. An exploration of character is usually not about a singular joke, right? Like this person has ants in their eyes, right? That's from like Rick and Morty. There are game moves there, which is like a game move of that is like, ow, my eyes are burning. They're just made of ants, or like the queen lives in my brain. Well, Queen Lives in My Brain is exploration, but like they're like they're eating my eyeballs. That's a little bit of heightening. I only see ants. That's another bit of heightening. Oh, actually, oof. Oh man, I'm actually doing the opposite. I'm doing the opposite there. Heightening. Let's talk about heightening really quick. Let's talk about a much more clear case of heightening. I won't use something from a television show. Okay. Heightening. I seem so much less authoritative all of a sudden. Heightening will be like, what's it called? Like, yeah, I like donuts. And, someone's like got like a thing of like 12 donuts, and another person is like, oh yeah, me too. I'm pretty casual about it. I have a donut every once in a while. And that person has someone show up with like a gigantic like case of them, like, and just slams it on their table. Another person goes like, I don't know, I'm back and forth on donuts, I'll have one every once in a while. We hear a truck in the background beeping, and we see like a bunch of donuts getting dumped. Those are game moves that all involve heightening, right? The game is each person is like increasingly like ambivalent, like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. They say something that makes it sound like they're very, they're increasingly disinterested in donuts. However, the other side of it is there seems to be even more donuts being delivered to them. Not the funniest joke, but a clear example of like gaming heightening. Exploration. I'll use the ants in the eyes, the ants in the eyes thing there. So having ants in your eyes causes lots of consequences, and we want to explore those consequences. So in exploration, we might find out that your eyes are burning, that the ants eat your eyes, that the queen is in your brain, right? These feel a little heightened because they sound crazier, but actually what we're doing is we're learning about more consequences of having ants in your eyes. Exploration moves usually try to spread out and find out more things about that character. What else could be true? If this is true, what else is true? And usually we end up finding new games. Games like having an ant in your brain. We might also find out that you have a roach in your heart and a rat in your thigh, or whatever, right? And in this case, the game is that there is a pattern of different creatures who control your different organs. And then we would explore what the consequences are of having a roach in your heart or a rat in your leg or whatever else it ends up being. Okay, hopefully that was a good explanation. I'm going to leave in all of me messing up because it's fun. It's fun. We're having fun. And these are pretty loose videos. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. These are pretty loose. Okay, scene constraints. Scene constraints are very common for monoscenes. Scene constraint looks like, hey, we want a location, like this scene is going to be entirely in a cafe. This scene is going to be on the field of a soccer, is going to be on a soccer field or whatever else. Scene constraints are very common in monoscenes. It's more weird to break them. And I've only seen like a couple teams break them, and not like normally. It'll be like a whole team being like, well, let's walk over there then. And the whole team does miming walking and then sits in a new location. Idea constraints. So, idea constraints are very often in formats where you're like, hey, we're going to hear a monologue and we're going to pull ideas from the monologue. Those are idea constraints. Or can someone tell us about the last time something embarrassing happened to them? Those are again idea constraints, because it's like, okay, we're not going to try to stray too far away from this story, or we're going to do a pattern game, or we're going to do some sort of opening that gives us ideas. We're just going to generate ideas, and we're going to be constrained to those ideas. Those are idea constraints, and we can implement them in a monoscene just as well. We'll also talk about scene interplay and connection. This is really important. If you've ever done like a JTS Brown or a deconstruction, plays a whole lot with how scenes relate with one another, and it produces funny, interesting consequences. So scenic interplay is, for example, when I was talking about Harold and someone does a game in a scene, and when we return to that scene, we do that game again. The connection between those scenes is that we are doing a game move between those scenes, right? Or not a game move, but like we are carrying over the game. We could do the same thing with a scene interplay between two in like a Laurent, where the interplay is that we have the same character but in a different context. And so they don't necessarily have to play the same game, right? We can find out that someone who's a really mean boss in their office in another scene with their mom is actually like very apologetic and very, very self-conscious and insecure. That is a way that we can connect two different scenes and produce new relationships. So whenever we're talking about a format, that scenic connection can also be an important place where we're producing comedy. We're making the format feel different. Another place that is a format consideration is whether we're doing narrative-based, character-based, or like sketch-based stuff. So narrative-based is, I see this a lot in musical improv, right? Beginning of the story, introduction of a problem, resolution, introduction of a problem, challenge, climax, resolution. I think it's something like that, right? Traditional story. And there are improv formats that try to follow that formula. So each new scene follows another beat of a story, so we move the narrative forward. Or we have a character-based thing where we introduce one or two or three characters. We want to meet those characters in all their variations. And the third one is the sketch style, which is usually like a game-based or exploration-based improv. So these are the kind of format considerations. And you can have narrative improv that has game moves in it. You can have scenic constraints for a sketch style show, right? We're only going to do game moves, but it's all going to be game moves inside of a school, right? So of these six, and I think there are probably more, but these are the six that I immediately thought of when I was doing this video. These blended together and mixed and matched can produce different formats that feel very different, can be unique to your team. So how do these relate to a monoscene? In a monoscene, game is going to be really hard, and it's why you don't see like a lot of UCB teams produce monoscene ensembles, monoscene groups. And if they do, they're usually producing a lot of moves that aren't like gamey moves. They're usually like more actory teams. Even still, you can have game moves and you can isolate games in a monoscene. This is just my opinion. And usually in this situation, what we want to do is figure out what the game looks like. And one game might be that, I'm going to borrow this from like Community. One guy is like secretly, oh no, that's not a really good. Exploration moves are like really, that's the stuff. I really love an exploration move. Heightening and game moves are less fun to me. Less fun to me. But let's take a game like one of the games, and I'm gonna borrow this from my friend Will, who did this sketch. So I'm not a funny genius. He is. The game is that typically we talk about. Some emoji showed up. Whatever. This video is real. This is going to be like pretty. Let me make sure the video is still going. Okay, it is. This is going to be pretty casual video, guys. So a game could be that, like, normally in our day-to-day lives, like, parents want our kids to go to like prestigious schools, or there's an archetype of parents who want their kids to like go to Harvard or whatever. And the game here is that instead we have two parents who really want their kids to get into extreme sports, right? And they're like, you're not going to go to, you're not going to go to a skate school, right? And now we get to play the mapping of that. And in a Monoscene, that could show up as like a whole family of 6 buying into this, or just 3 people of the 6 having this emphasis and the other 3 people being like, you don't want your kid to go to Harvard or whatever. This is a game, right? And everyone can participate in the game. And if we want to do a Monoscene where we isolate those kinds of things, we'll have to pick up on little dynamics like that. Exploration is a whole lot easier in a Monoscene, and what we want to do in a Monoscene is make sure that we are covering at least each character, which means that we're passing focus enough, which means that as a team we agree that we're going to spend time learning about character A, then we're going to learn about character B, and then we're going to learn about character C, and then we're going to learn about character D. And having that in the back of everyone's minds is really helpful in a Monoscene, because if you ever feel stuck in a scene or you're panicking about what's going on, you can be like, oh, right. Even though we're in the same scene, our focus is going to be figuring out one of these characters and figuring out who they are and exploring their character and their point of view and their perspective. The third kind of constraint that we talked about is scenic constraint. This is very easy for a Monoscene, but I want to talk about the exception. So most of the time a Monoscene means that we're all going to stay on a boat, or we're going to be on, and it's going to be like a subsection of the boat, right? We're on the bow of the boat. We're lounging by the pool on a yacht or whatever. But we could say that in a Monoscene, we at one point or at any point in the show, or we want to do this at least 3 times, we want to introduce a transition or a move of some variety, but all 6 of us stay on stage. And I've seen this, for instance, everyone was sitting on a plane together, right? When the plane landed, they all got up, they got their bags and whatever, and then they stood in line. That doesn't feel like a huge shift, but it is the kind of shift that produces new results, right? Because the characters now aren't sitting next to each other, they're shuffled, and it produces new dynamics. Monoscenes can also have idea constraints. Same thing, we can take a monologue and just do a Monoscene about the monologue. And in this situation, what we want to do is like each person clearly identify the thing from the monologue or the thing from the idea generating exercise, whatever it ends up being. You can basically take any opening and stick it on the front of a Monoscene. And then whenever the whole team hears that idea that's pulled from whatever you use to generate ideas, then the whole team goes like, okay, now we have to pause and focus in on this thing, right? Doesn't matter what all the other characters said, but like we all recognize that this is a thing that came from the Monoscene, so we're going to center ourselves around that idea. Scenic interplay. This is another one of the format considerations we talked about. And one of the ways that we can have a lot of scenic interplay is by overlaying a different format on top of a Monoscene. So this could be a piñata, but I'm going to use an example, or this could be a Spokane if you want to see the last video about a Spokane and how it works. But I'm going to use a Herald because most people learn a Herald, and this will be pretty easy to put into a Monoscene. So Herald format is usually a scene between, let's make this really simple. 2-person scene A, another 2-person scene B, another 2-person scene C, group game. We're going to return to scene A, right? In whatever way we decide to return to scene A, then we're going to return to scene B, and then we're going to return to scene 3, and then we're going to have a group game, right? This is sort of the hamburger of a Herald. Scene 1, 2, and 3, group game, and then return to scene 1, a return to scene 2, a return to scene 3, group game, and then whatever you put at the very end of your herald. And there are lots of options for that. So what we do in a monoscene then is we have 6 people or 8 people or whatever else it is, and we let 2 to 3 people lead the scene for a little bit, right? And they control, not everyone can't like chime in a little bit, but they're driving the scene. And then the team passes focus to another group, right? 2 people. So we might find out that 3 friends showed up late and they're fighting over who showed up late, and we learn about their characters. And partway through, we go, well, like, hopefully you guys resolved that or figured out. Guess who just started dating? And now we meet these 2 people who are introducing the fact that they're now dating to the entire group. That's a new scene, and everyone reacts and they do their thing. And then we have a third scene where all 6 people stay on stage, and we learn a new thing, which is, someone goes like, I bought a house. And someone goes like, and it sounds like it's in the most dangerous part of town. He goes, yep. I like danger, or whatever, right? We hear game moves about danger. So now we have 3 scenes inside the monoscene, which is people fighting about getting there late, 2 people who are now romantically involved, and then this person who bought a home, and it's pretty dangerous. Then we have a group game, right? So a group game could be all 6 of these people get their coffees, and they start like, oh my God, this is amazing coffee, and blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as they put their coffees down, we're going to return to this scene where these people are talking about their fight. They'll re-explode. They'll relearn how to figure out how to get back into that fight. And then we're going to return back to this couple, and then we're going to return back to this house, and then we're going to have another group game. Maybe everyone finds out that, I don't know, someone, we find out something that the entire team reacts to. So this is a way that we can take a monoscene and break it into pieces, and use scenic constraints in order to provide focus for a monoscene. Yeah. These are my thoughts about a monoscene. If y'all want to see more videos, just tell me what you're interested in seeing. If you want to see me talk about a piñata or a piñata is, drop it in the comment, and I'll do that next. Thanks. Bye.